Great Friday morning, everyone. We just hit the admit button, so we're just giving it a moment or two for all of our Zoom virtual community members to join us and get settled. We also know that many of you join us by LinkedIn Live, and so we welcome you as well. If you would, please take a moment to go to the chat or to the comment section if you're joined by LinkedIn and let us know where you are joining the conversation from. It's always a treat for us to see where folks are joining the conversation from. We tend to have people from all over, domestic and outside of the US, and that excites us every single week. I'm Dr. Nika White, the host of Intentional Conversations VodCast. And we are so excited that you are here. We've been expecting you, and we know that this hour is going to be time well spent. We also know that this hour you could be doing anything else, but the fact that you have decided to spend this time with us, we're really grateful for that. I cannot wait to introduce our guest co-host today. But before we get there, we often like to just make sure we can provide a couple of thoughts for you to keep top of mind as we engage in this hour together, learning with and from each other. And so cameras, if you're joined as part of our Zoom community, they are encouraged, but certainly not required. We do love seeing smiling faces. And so if you will feel inclined to turn your cameras on, we do appreciate that. Also want to let you know that chat is a great way, and the comment section, if you're joined again by LinkedIn, is also a great way to stay connected and to really have a strong sense of community and get proximate to each other as we learn with and from each other today. And so if I say something that resonates with you, I invite you to go to the chat, share your thoughts, your sentiments. If our guest co-host or one of the members of our podcast community happens to share something and you want to stand in solidarity with that person or provide some affirmations to what they're sharing, then you know what to do. Go to the chat. That's going to be our lifeline and a way for us to increase that sense of community while we're here with each other today. Also want you to be aware that at NWC, we really do practice disability inclusion. And so our way of showing up for the disability community as part of our podcast is to make sure that closed caption is always enabled. And so I wanted to draw your attention to that factor. I also want to let you know that if you feel inclined to invite this community to connect with you beyond this hour of time together today, then we encourage you to share your LinkedIn information into the chat. And again, if you're joining us by LinkedIn, then folks will see that and they'll know that you are also maybe someone that is interested in connecting with members of this community. Want to take a moment to just shout out the NWC team, who is also very much a part of bringing this virtual experience to the broader community. It is our way of showing up for those community members who wish to learn and deepen their understanding of issues related to diversity, equity, and inclusion, leadership, and business. And so thank you so much for joining us. Once again, this is Intentional Conversations VodCast. Let the conversation begin, and that we shall. So I want to welcome you all again. I am Dr. Nika White. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I have the privilege and honor of serving as the founder and lead principal consultant for NWC, and you have joined Intentional Conversations VodCast, where we intersect discussions regarding diversity, equity, and inclusion with leadership and business. So I just want to take a moment to share a few things with you. This is something that we like to do as part of our Intentional Conversations VodCast, is just bring to your attention some of the national observances that are happening in that month. And so we just entered into June yesterday. And so June has a lot that's coming at us. First and foremost, it is Pride Month. And so at NWC, we certainly acknowledge all of the humanity rights that the LGBTQIA plus community deserves. And we hope that you stand with us in making sure that we can fight against any type of harassment, violence, and discrimination of the LGBTQ community. And so keep in mind that while we like to highlight these national observances, it's not just in that month that we want to make sure we are including and still practicing all of our ways of showing up as allies to those communities who are marginalized. June is also Immigrant Heritage Month. So for some of you who are hearing this for the first time, I want you to know that Immigrant Heritage Month in the US, we celebrate our shared heritage on as an immigrant nation. So I want you to be mindful of that as well. And then June, again, as I mentioned, lots of things are going on. We're also going to be celebrating Juneteenth in this month. And so Juneteenth is going to be observed on the 19th. And this is when the enslaved people in Galveston, Texas, finally received word that they were free and free indeed. And so we're not free until all of us are free. So this is an opportunity for us to celebrate, to center the lived experiences and the history of Black people. And so I want you to make sure you are finding ways to create some meaningful experiences to really highlight the Black joy, the Black resilience, the ancestry and the history of Black people in America. And if you need some help doing that, please reach out to us at NWC. We have lots of great programming that we would like to bring to your organization. Now, if you've been following us for quite some time, you know that earlier this year, at the end of January, I released book number 3 in partnership with Forbes Books, and it is Inclusion Uncomplicated, a transformative guide to simplify DEI. It is available in Kindle, hard copy, as well as audiobooks. So if you haven't received your copy yet, I do encourage you to get one, or if you have, maybe gift a book to someone else. Really would love to be in conversation with you about what you're learning as you get into Inclusion Uncomplicated. We also have some great learning experiences that we have developed in conjunction with the book, Inclusion Uncomplicated, and those learning experiences are all entitled Unravel the Knot, and it is an inclusion complicated learning experience. We have multiple ways in which this learning experience can be executed within your organization. And so we ask that you reach out to us in case you're interested in having a conversation about it. And we'll also drop into the chat a link to the page on our website where you can learn more. Now, one of the things I love to do at the beginning of our Intentional Conversations VodCast is just to give you a little bit of information for what you have to look forward to in future weeks in terms of our guest co-host. And so next Friday, June the 9th, we're going to be welcoming Dr. Vanessa Marie Perry. And in that conversation, we're going to be discussing empowering Black women leaders, creating safe spaces for Black and Brown women, and also what's important for the next generation of DEI practitioners. And so if you do not follow Dr. Vanessa Perry, I invite you to. She puts out some great content, and I know that you will certainly learn a lot from being connected to her. And then that following Friday on the 16th, we have Future Kane, also another great practitioner in this space, and we're going to be discussing social emotional leadership, wellness, equity, and humanities connectedness for our future. And so no pun intended, but Future King is going to be talking about humanities connectedness for our future on June 16th. And then close to rounding out the month of June, we have Dana Brownlee. She does a lot of writing for Forbes. You may know her from some of her great articles that she writes for Forbes, but even beyond that, she is a wonderful practitioner of just leadership and teamwork. And so I can't wait for you to meet her. And part of what we're going to be discussing is listening to the past, how those outside DEI can be vocal about workplace anti-racism and calling in versus calling out. We use that language a lot in this space in the DEI community. So you don't want to miss us on June 23rd, where Dana Brownlee is going to be joining me as my guest co-host. And then finally, the last Friday in June 30th, my friend Nada Jenkins is going to be joining, and we're going to be discussing closing the racial wealth gap through radical allyship, removing subjectivity from the DEI measurement process, how leaders can overcome unconscious bias. And so again, I hope that you will place all of those dates into your calendar and that you will join us for what I know is going to be some riveting conversations. We also like to let you know that many of our guest co-hosts come to us by way of recommendations from those of you who are connected to this podcast community. And we love that. So if you have someone that you think would make for a great Intentional Conversations guest co-host, we invite you to share that information with us. And you can do so by sending it to my colleague, Amora Carter, and her email is amora@nikalight.com. Just note that we're now booking for fourth quarter. We are booked out up until then, but we really look forward to your recommendations for Q4. Now, it does me great pleasure to introduce my friend, someone who I've known for quite some time, and so that you can have the benefit of understanding her credentials and her experience and how she showed up to this work and to this space. And I am talking about none other than Dr. Katrina Hutchins. Katrina Hutchins, affectionately known as Dr. K, is the founder and CEO of Resource Solutions, LLC, an organizational excellence consulting company. As a certified executive coach, consultant, inspirational speaker, author, professor, and philanthropist, Dr. K has gained decades of experience in corporate, governmental, higher education, philanthropic, nonprofit, and faith-based sectors. As a scholar, Dr. K's research is focused on the power of women's voices. As such, her fourth book, The Voice Positioning System, 7 Ways to Harness Your Power and Master Your Influence, has been the catalyst for voice transformation for thousands of readers and voice workshop sessions participants. Dr. K earned a Bachelor of Arts degree from Columbia College and a master's degree in social work from the University of South Carolina. Go Gamecocks. She earned her doctoral degree in education with the concentration in organizational leadership from Northeastern University. So you know what to do, VodCast community, for those of you who've been with us for quite some time. At this point, this is when we pull out some of our accolades, some words of affirmation, we place them into the chat, we find those reactions in Zoom or those emojis, and we let our guest co-host know how much we appreciate her being here with us today. And I am going to add her to the spotlight so that you all can see her beautiful face. And I am so excited, my dear friend. Now, we have not connected in quite some time. So I'm going to have to really work hard to kind of contain my excitement today because I miss our sister girl talks. I miss, the frequency in which we were able to previously just connect with each other. So this is really a treat for me. But I'm not going to let you off the hook, Dr. K. One of the things that I ask of every single co-host, no matter who they are, longtime friends or not, is to share with us something that we would not know about you from reading your bio or from looking and reading your LinkedIn profile. So find some stuff to share and welcome, my friend.
Thank you so much. First of all, let me say how excited I am. I will share something about me, but I've got to honor this moment being in this space with you, Dr. Nika. It has been such a long time, and to reconnect here as a part of this amazing and powerful work you're doing. I just admire you and appreciate you so greatly for your contribution to the field and to the world. And just watching you soar has been a tremendous blessing for me. So thank you for the invitation to join you here. I have got to also make a statement about my picture and my now, right? So as you were reading my bio and I was kind of looking at that graphic, I thought, well, there's something that's very different.
That's true. That's true. And the first thing I said was, wait a minute, can you turn to the side? I need to see the profile. Is it cut or is it just pulled back? And you're like, no, it is cut. I love it. It looks so great on you. I love it.
Thank you. And I think it's so connected to our conversation today, Dr. Nika, because, Black women in hair, that's a thing.
Oh.
Right? And
Tell me
so
about it.
making this decision to cut my hair was huge because it wasn't just kind of a choice for vanity. It was a choice as a new beginning. It was very symbolic for me. And I'll share something that did not show up in my bio. At the end of my bio, it used to say that Dr. K, is a wife, all of those things. I am still that, but I want to be very transparent in this space because I believe I can. I'm showing up almost 6 months into having lost my husband in December of last year, December 5th of last year. And so I am creating new ways of being. And so this new hairdo is a part of that creation, right? And so it was so symbolic of a new beginning for me. And so I just want to share that, and I'll use that as my thing that did not show up in
Yeah.
bio, and to share this with this community. I think sometimes grief and loss are things that we don't often talk about. And I
That's so
want
true.
to certainly put that on the table. Dr. Nika, I've actually been thinking about how much we do not have that conversation in leadership spaces, in organizational spaces, right? We just kind of give people 3 days and
Yeah.
expect them to come back and be okay, right?
Yes.
So just bringing that process forward, and even as a consideration for others who may be around us, who may be grieving,
Mm,
and we're not
yeah.
acknowledging that process for them. So
Yeah.
just wanted to put that on our table today.
I'm so glad you did, Dr. K. So glad you did. And you are, so first and foremost, once again, my condolences to you. And you mentioned that you're sharing because it's one of those things that people would not know. And I think that also what's even more remarkable about that statement is even for those who are part of maybe your following and they are paying attention to your commentary over the past 6 months, you have continued to show up as Dr. K very consistently. And I think there's something to be said for that, especially as it allows us to go further into the way in which people grieve and how that process can look vastly different. And my heart goes out to you, and I appreciate your boldness and your vulnerability and wanting to bring that to today's conversation because you're right. I don't think that we talk about it enough.
Yes.
And I tend to think that, grieving, it shows up in many different regards, not just the loss of life. And I realize that the loss of life is probably one of the hardest ways that people grieve. But when I also think about the pandemic and I think about, May, we just came out of Mental Health Awareness Month and how people are just coming into the revelation of their new normal is now, it's different because maybe they have been diagnosed with some type of mental illness. I mean, there's just so much that I feel like people grieve in life. The economy, a lot of people have lost jobs and they're grieving that. And they're grieving maybe the future that they felt like they had envisioned and thinking maybe that's not going to come to fruition. And so I just want us to hold space for all types of grief right now. And you have given us that gift to do so by naming what your experience has been and what you've been navigating over the past 6 months. And so I want to thank you for that because I do agree that many of us have no idea what others could be grieving and how it's impacting them. And so thank you so much for that space and that time, Dr. K. Thank
You.
you. Yeah, and the haircut is beautiful once again. So, so many people may not know, but you are presently in Florida. And how long have you been in Florida, Dr. K?
It's 2018,
Since
August of
20,
2018.
yes, August of 2018. And I would imagine that many people hearing that, some curiosities are surfacing for them, right? We know that there are a number of states that are under attack in a way that has maybe not quite yet reached that level of intensity in other states. And many of us are holding our breaths thinking we don't want this to gain speed. But in many ways, we are feeling like it has the potential to if we aren't really careful. And so being someone that is positioned physically in the state of Florida, which is really challenged in a number of ways, can you share with us just a little bit about what you're hearing in terms of other practitioners, how you very specifically are navigating maybe some of those complexities by being someone in this space, and whatever else that you feel like would be useful for this community to know?
Absolutely. Thank you for that question. And interestingly enough, I believe it's so tied in with grief. So what I'm hearing is loss. I'm hearing
Yeah,
about loss. I'm learning about practitioners who are being shifted
yeah,
out of positions, or maybe not even having their positions anymore. I am grateful that I get to do this work as a consultant, but there are some people in organizations who are literally losing their jobs as a result of some of what we are seeing and experiencing. And there is great loss, there is great sadness connected to some of what we're witnessing. One of the things that I think is critically important for us to remember is, as we kind of have eyes on Florida,
yep,
this could very well become something that is not just specific to Florida, right? But that impacts us across the country. And we already see sprinklings of that
Yes.
happening, right? But there is a trajectory toward this kind of thing. I was reading an article yesterday related to a major institution that I have just held in high regard,
Mhm.
um, who will be removing from their curriculum
Yeah.
DEI courses, and just this major shift. So I think it's so important, Dr. Nika, as we've talked about, and you know, my work is so deeply invested in voice, that we think critically about how we position our voices.
Right.
In these spaces, this voice positioning piece is so important because it's that mindful, strategic, critical way of understanding the best use of our voices and where our power may be, right?
Yeah.
And so it's
Yeah.
not just about jumping on a bandwagon and just kind of, beating our fist on the table. It is thinking about where might my voice be most powerful. Not in Florida,
Mhm.
absolutely, but across the country.
Of
And
course.
just going into this with our eyes wide open and great
Mhm.
sensitivity to what is happening, not just being a complainer,
Yeah.
but also
Mhm.
thinking strategically about where is my power.
Absolutely. And our power, we know, and you're going to amplify this today, is often in our voice. And so I so appreciate that we're going to be able to spend some time talking about that. Before I talk about how you found your way into centering a lot of your work around helping women to realize their power and their voice, I want to stay on this topic of higher learning institutions because you gave the example of you're seeing some learning institutions that are pulling away from their curriculum topics that relate to diversity, equity, and inclusion. And again, that's something that's also gaining speed across many different universities. What's also in the news right now is that soon the Supreme Court is going to be ruling on whether or not higher learning institutions can continue to consider race based as part of the criteria for admissions to higher learning institutions. And so, what are your thoughts? What are your thoughts on that, Dr. K?
I think it definitely is a voice opportunity. I won't even say a
Mhm.
voice issue. It's a voice
Yep.
opportunity.
Right.
And I think collectively, certainly individually, but collectively, we have to start thinking about how to amplify our voices together, right? So long gone are those days of the Lone Ranger, just that one voice crying in the wilderness, but looking for opportunities to collaborate, and to really start to amplify together as collectives. There's something about the power of collective voice. And so within institutions, having people move beyond their fear, sometimes that is the thing that's gripping them because they're so consumed by what I call the power of they. If I speak
Mm.
up, what will they say? What will they do? What will, how will they treat me? You know, and so moving beyond the fear and being able to ask the question, what about cause and effect? What if
Yeah.
I don't? Right?
Yes.
And seeing this as a responsibility, an obligation, and an opportunity. If not me, then who? And so
Yeah.
really seeing it, taking it as ownership, and not just for today, but for the next generation coming
Right.
behind us, right? It becomes a part of legacy conversations,
Mhm.
and thinking about how do we shift so that this does not, we don't fail history at this
Right.
point, right? Because we sat
Right.
in silence. There's
Yeah.
a quote that I love by Arundhati Roy, and she says, "There is no such thing as the voiceless, only the
Mm.
deliberately silenced or preferably unheard." And so
Yeah.
often in these instances, there are people who are deliberately silenced and preferably unheard. However, that cannot be our stopping point, right? And so
Yeah.
thinking about and always asking ourselves the question, I circle right back to, where is my power? Where is my power?
Yeah.
Where a person is concerned, where people are concerned, where places are concerned, and then situate myself in the truth I know about my power.
I love that. I love that. That is so rich. And you're right. Silence is a message as well. Sometimes people don't see it as that, but it is a message. I think sometimes people will feel if I stay on the sidelines and I be quiet and silent, then maybe I can remain in a neutral place, right? And I think that there are certain things that we have to be willing to take a firm position on and to use our voice around. So I love that you're amplifying that. I also love the reframe of what if I don't do it? Because I think oftentimes when we're making decisions, we're contemplating things that we feel like we should do, right? Versus, what if I don't do this? What are the implications if I don't do it? And I think that's an important question that we need to be willing to ask ourselves, especially when it relates to matters where our voice can really be leveraged as power, to your point.
That's right.
So
And
I
it's
want to,
about it, and it's also about, when we consider, Dr. Nika, cause and effect, we also have to move beyond just our heads, right?
yeah,
Sometimes we
yeah,
are trying to operate just from what we think, but I often encourage us to have a head heart engagement,
love that.
have a head
Yeah,
heart engagement, and then
yeah,
we're able to ask, do I have the heart to act? Not just
yeah.
what do I think about acting? Do I have the heart to act? Do I have the heart
Mhm.
to use my power for good? Right? Do I have
Right.
the heart to step into brave spaces? I used to say,
Mm,
step into safe spaces and have conversations. No, do I have the heart to step into and create brave
mhm,
spaces? What's the difference? In safe spaces, we can hide. In brave
mm.
spaces, have to step in with courage. And so being able to create and acting from not just our heads but our hearts, right? Because our hearts have that ability to really cause us to be sensitive, right? To people, places, and things around us.
We haven't even scratched the surface. We haven't even gotten to the first question yet, based upon some of the predetermined questions that we thought would make for good discussion, because we're just kind of being fluid right now, but that's okay because this is so rich. And I'm taking copious notes because I want to make sure that whenever I show up to these conversations, I'm also learning just like this community. And so, Dr. K, I dare not walk away from this hour without picking up some of the great nuggets that you're putting down. But, in safe spaces, people can hide. In brave spaces, people have to show forth that level of courage. That was so strong. I love that. And then, of course, we have to lead not just with our head, but with our head and our heart. I love that. And I think that when we do so, there's greater propensity for us to center humanity, which is really the core of what we're attempting to do in this world. It is about all people who are deserving of having full opportunity for success, be treated with dignity and respect. And so, so many great things that you're bringing to the conversation. I want to share this with you because I don't want to forget it, but I quote you all the time, Dr. K, and you probably don't even ever remember this, but I remember the first time that I heard you spoke, you said something and it just so resonated with me. And now I find it appropriate to every chance I get to quote you. And that is, you said, nothing about me without me.
Yes.
Nothing about me without me. And I want this community to understand the context behind that statement that I continue to quote you on. So this was not a planned question, but it popped into my head, and I thought I have to make sure that she can share this. But nothing about me without me. So tell us what that means to you.
That literally means plan nothing, do not make any decisions, policies, ways of being about me without my voice, right? Without inviting me. So oftentimes when policies are made, decisions are being made. They're being made around tables, Dr. Nika, where voices are not present, and those decisions are being made about people, and their voices are not even present. So nothing about me without me is that amplification of bring me to your tables. Don't plan anything about me, about my community, about any aspect of who I am and what I'm connected to, if you are not willing to bring my voice to inform those decisions, to inform those policies. I think any decision, any policy impacting other people, and those people have not been a part of those conversations, is a flawed policy and a flawed decision. And it does not represent humanity. I think it's
Mhm.
inhumane to plan
Mhm.
something for someone that will impact their lives in deep ways, and you
Mhm.
never bothered to ask. And so
Yes.
that piece is what really emerges out of nothing about me without me.
Absolutely. I love it. I'm with you, Miss Shirley Scott. She has the clap hands going on into the chat, and others are kind of resonating with what you're sharing as well. Okay. So this brings us to a question where you get to now unpack for us this whole vision that you had around helping women to understand how to center the power of their voice. And so when did you find your voice, Dr. K? And why is it important, particularly for women that you often will share this message with, to find their voice as well?
So I really have to back us up to when my first recollection of losing my voice.
Okay.
And it was just kind of a story that happened when I was in second grade. You know, I grew up in the country, a good country girl, grew up in South Carolina in the country. Yes, yes, yes. And this was in the 60s. And so when I was in had the opportunity to go to first grade, I had the opportunity to go to Waverly Elementary, which was an all Black elementary school right in the heart of the city, right in the heart of Columbia, South Carolina. And I was able to do that because my mom worked at Benedict College, which is an
Mhm.
HBCU, right in the heart of the city. And she worked in the registrar's office. So I was able to ride in with her commute, probably about 35 minutes from where we live. So this was the big time, right? This was the big city. And so I thought I was the stuff, of course, going to first grade in the city, but loved Waverly Elementary. My first grade teacher, my classmates, loved learning, and was looking forward to coming back for second grade. And while we were out for that summer, my parents received a letter in the mail that said I wasn't going to be able to go back to Waverly, that they were
Mm,
rezoning in my area, and I was
mm,
now going to be bused into a new school. And so summer ended. The first day of second grade in this new school, my new second grade teacher made it very clear that she was not happy with some of us who had now shown up in her classroom. But in my mind, I thought, it's okay. I know how to do school. I'm going to be fine. So,
mhm.
on about the third day of that first week, she said, on Friday, you can bring items for show and tell. And I thought, that's it. I'm going to rock show and tell. I will show her what I'm working with, right? And so it was my mom's custom now to drop me off at grandma's. Grandma would put me on the bus while she and my dad went on their commute. So here is Friday morning. I'm at grandma's and realized that I did not have anything for show and tell. So I have a meltdown in grandma's kitchen. And so she said, Child, what is wrong with you? And I told her that I didn't have anything for show and tell. So she runs and picks up something, puts it in her hand, runs me down to the bus. I get on the bus, open my hand. Grandma has put a beautiful marble in it, a big marble. And
Mm,
I thought to
mhm.
myself, it sure is pretty. Don't know what I'm going to say about it, but it's pretty. Get to my second grade class, sit in my seat, put my marble in my cubby, to wait for show and tell. So finally, at the end of the day, the teacher said, you can take out your items for show and tell. I got ready to reach for my marble, and there was a little white boy sitting next to me, and he reached over and grabbed it. And so I looked at him and I said, that's my marble. You can't have my marble. And so I raised my hand to get her attention, and she looked at me and turned away. And I raised my hand again to get her attention. She looked at me and rolled her eyes and turned away. And so this time I said, please, please. She came over to where we were sitting and she said to me, what is it? I said, he just took my marble. And she looked at him and she said, did you take her marble? And he looked at me and looked back at her. And in front of the entire class, he said, I didn't take that nigger's marble. And I sat that day, Dr. Nika, and watched that little boy do show and tell with the marble grandma gave me.
Sorry.
And in that moment, in that space, in that time, I went from being that happy-go-lucky little girl to now someone who was very afraid in her world, someone who felt unsafe, but most of all, a little girl who had just lost her voice. And so that was my first recollection of feeling like I had voice snatched out of me. And I started to make that connection as an adult because I kept feeling this voice dysfunction in my life as an adult. And when I started to do this work, I was able to trace that voice dysfunction all the way back to that first instance when I lost my voice. And so this work became a work of passion for me because what happened as I went through my teenage years, young adulthood, into my adult life, I did not recognize the level of voice dysfunction that I was carrying. And I want to say this, and I really started to recognize it when I was actually in church. Let me say that because I want to be very honest. I grew up in the church. I just kind of grew up learning how to flash this blessed and highly favored smile. But there was so much dysfunction, primarily related to my voice on the inside. And that dysfunction governed my decisions, governed my choices, governed my inability to have no boundaries, governed my govern my inability to say no. All of these things that I needed voice for, I did not have. And so when I fast forward to my doctoral studies, I literally did my dissertation on women who are in faith-based organizations where organizational silence is present. I learned so much from the study. And as I've been able to do this work now for several years, I have learned the complexities of women in spaces where their voices are minimized, undervalued, unseen, unheard. And let me clarify voice. Only 7% of our voice shows up in words. The other 93% is our presence. How we come in a room, what the room feels like when we leave it. It's our attitude, our demeanor, our disposition. Everything that we embody represents our voice. And I started to recognize how fragmented we are, fragmented and misaligned from our words versus our actions, seeing those two things as separate when in actuality, they are supposed to be integrated. Our words should be matching our 93%, right? I often say that our audio should match our video.
Yeah.
That level of integration. And so that's my long response to why I do this work, why I'm so passionate how I came to do this work, and the value, the tremendous value that I am seeing when women really start to understand this intrinsic voice power that we all embody.
So Dr. K, I'm sorry that that was your experience. That's a really jarring story. And I remember hearing parts of that story before, as this really has become a part of your platform, and how you talk about, the power of voice being a part of your messaging. And it is jarring every single time. As I was just listening to your story, I began to just kind of jot down some of the infractions and I mean, I had to stop writing because I thought I could go on and on and on. But the name calling, the stealing of your personal items, so the entitlement, being ignored and treated as invisible. I mean, so much oppression is in this story. It's ridiculous. The disrespectful person, and add fuel to the fire. Not only are you going to take my marble, but you're going to get credit for it, although as though it's yours. And that's also something that we see play out day in and day out today in so many different spaces, including the workplace. And so I know that many in this community were really hanging on to your every word, and your story definitely resonates with many people. But I just want to thank you for your willingness to share that story, because it can't be easy. I'm curious, Dr. K, do you think that women, especially Black women in particular, do they understand the level of influence that they have in corporate spaces, and just the country overall? Because I find that to be one of the biggest challenges, is that sometimes women of color, we don't know our own worth, which means it's hard for us to stand in our worth and use our voice with such a high level of confidence. So how do you help those women bridge that gap? And do you see that that is part of women of color's experience as well?
Absolutely, I do. Is exactly what you just said. Is oftentimes not knowing our own worth, not knowing our value. And I'll go back to the story, because here's a powerful part of that, Dr. Nika, is not only did I have my marble store stolen, right? But I had to sit and watch somebody else do something with what belonged to me. And I think, even culturally, generationally, oftentimes we've been taught to
Yeah.
stay on the sidelines. And even if we have contributed, there are those instances where we have had to sit and watch someone else do something with our contribution, right? Whether it
Yeah.
was our idea, we had to watch someone else get credit for it. Whether it
Mhm.
was something that we contributed in a powerful way,
Yeah.
we have had to sit and watch. And in that process, in order to survive it,
Mhm.
right? Sometimes we have turned down our own volume, or we
Right.
have minimized, right? In order to just survive it. And in that survival mode, we started to normalize it. And what we did not recognize is how much normalizing, how much minimizing was literally making our souls sick. And so
Oh,
many of the women I have the opportunity to coach, along with their voice dysfunction, Dr. Nika, is what I have been really focused in on, is soul fatigue.
mhm. Mhm.
Folks
Mhm.
are tired.
Yeah,
And
they're
so for
tired.
some women, they don't know their value. But then there's the other piece where they do, and they're just tired, right? They're tired of fighting. They're tired
Yeah.
of being the voice. They're tired of being the strong one. They're tired of being the one that is always looked to when these kinds of
Yeah.
conversations need to happen. They don't want to be the one that is the cheerleader for
Right.
for all things Black, right? And so there is just this sense of feeling tired. So I meet women kind of on two extremes. Sometimes they don't know, but other times they do, and they're tired. And so the coaching piece kind of emerges organically based upon where I find them.
Yeah, that is so real. And I would imagine that for the women that have the privilege of working with you, that perhaps they go through cycles and ebbs and flows. It could be very much influenced by what's happening in their lives at that moment that causes them to feel like I do have the emotional capacity to kind of, suppress the fatigue and keep fighting and to keep trying to advocate for myself. And then other times it's like I have nothing to give in this moment. And so what I want this audience to be able to walk away with is that we know the reality of it. We know the sad reality of what many experience who feel like they are voiceless. What I want though for this community to walk away with is that hope in that there are strategies and tactics and things to do to help overcome that if someone were to find themselves feeling like they're voiceless. And so in your fourth book, which I gave the title of The Voice Positioning System, 7 Ways to Harness Your Power and Master Your Influence, I know that it's helped thousands of people. Can you share with us maybe just some of the top strategies or takeaways that would be of use to this community if they are looking to help encourage a colleague or a friend or a family member who has grown voiceless?
Absolutely. So, there's so much embedded in the book because it's so complex, so many complexities related to voice positioning. First and foremost, I created a framework that moved us from just simply using our voices. We can all
Mhm.
use our voices, it's a human function, right?
Yeah,
Voice positioning is a deeper dive. It's a deeper
mhm,
consideration. Voice positioning requires the critical thought. It requires
yeah,
mindfulness. It requires strategies to be able to do that. And so, one of the biggest pieces is first and foremost self reflection, introspection about the condition of our voices, right? At the beginning of the book, I ask questions around where might your voice be compromised? And I even
yeah.
give some examples of your voice is compromised when. And so it's
Mhm.
almost a self assessment because we can exist in silence and just kind of muted voice or low volume voice and voice fragmentation. We can exist there for so long. We start to become desensitized to the weight
Right.
of being there, right? And
Yeah.
so at the very beginning, having these aha moments, I think the voice identity piece is so critically important. Getting to know your voice. I remember one of my participants in the study, Dr. Nika, had such a profound aha moment when she recognized for all of my life, I didn't even know my own sound. I didn't even know the sound of my own voice. She
Mhm.
had lived so externally through other people's voices and the shoulds and the coulds from other people that she never ventured in to even understand the beauty of the sound of her own voice. And so the first piece is voice identity. So even before we
Mhm.
can position our voices, I
Yeah.
haven't had enough coffee, even before we can position our voices, it is even knowing my voice, acknowledging its power, right? Getting to
Mhm.
know what I bring in my voice as a part of my voice visibility, how I'm showing up, what that really means. And so that is the first part. And then from there, we start to think about how to position. And what that means is in considering various scenarios in our lives where we recognize that I am undervalued here, right?
Mhm.
I'm
Mhm.
not being seen like I need to be seen here. I'm not being heard like I need to be heard here. And so bringing voice to the sense of being unseen, unheard, and undervalued, right? Sometimes we're expecting people to change that for us, when in
Yes,
actuality, it's our own voice that brings the change.
it's true.
And so here's some aha moments that can emerge
Mm,
out of that as well. And sometimes in that process, we will recognize that what we've been waiting for other people to do for us,
yeah,
the key to the change was always our own voice.
yeah.
And so once we bring voice to those situations, we'll start to recognize, well, first of all, I didn't need their approval. Waited all this time for something I never needed, at all,
Right.
right? I didn't need their endorsement, right? I
Mhm.
didn't need their yes. And so it starts to help us make healthier decisions, healthy choices. Voice positioning starts to help us to manage our no and our yes. You know, I
Yeah.
often say to so many women I work with who are just so challenged with NO, it just so challenged. uh,
Right.
Not being able to say no, but I lead them on this path to understanding NO really means not obligated. And that is your
Yeah.
gauge, right? That is your gauge. Asking the question, am I obligated? And so, again, long answer, I could stay in this voice positioning piece for an entire weekend. But really, first of all, is the voice identity piece. And then being able to move into the deep positioning that goes along with that.
I love that. And we're going to undoubtedly run out of time today, but I do want to make sure this community knows that we have placed a link to your book into the chat, one of your many books, but the one that we're talking about today regarding the voice into the chat. I do hope that you all will get that. And I'm going to shift. I will allow our audience, if you have some questions or curiosities that are coming up, we will allow at least a few moments for maybe 1 to 2 people to present questions. But what I want to do while maybe folks are thinking about the questions they would like to present, and by the way, you can let me know that you're willing to ask a question by using the raise hand feature if you're part of this Zoom community, and I will allow you to unmute yourself and I will spotlight you. Or if you're joining us by LinkedIn Live, you can place your question into the comment section and we will bring that over into this environment. But I want to go back to something you said that was really important that I don't want this audience to miss. You said that because you've been using the word voice several times throughout our conversation. And voice is not just our words, it's not just the verbal. You said that it's 7% of the words, but it's 93% of the presence. And so I want you to expound upon that just a little bit further while folks are thinking about maybe some of their questions, because I think that's a really important takeaway that we need to make sure people are clearly understanding around this broader topic.
Yes, our presence. So the 93% is actually where we can sabotage our 7%, right? Because we can be
Mhm.
saying one thing, but how we show up, again, our presence. Have you ever been sitting in a room and someone walked in and they didn't say anything, Dr. Nika, but by the way that they came in the room,
Yeah,
you heard in the back of your head, wah, wah.
yeah, yeah,
Just
exactly,
because of
exactly.
how they came in the room. So we are always speaking, even when there are no words, we are always speaking. We are always saying something. So we have to be aware of what our very presence says to someone, the
Yeah,
energy that we bring, how we even communicate through our bodies and our body language. There is so much to be said about that, right? And so
yeah,
that 93% is so very crucial, not just our words. Sometimes when we think about voice, we're thinking about our tone, and the words we
right.
use and how we say things. Of course, that's huge. But I really want to point us to this sense of presence, and especially
Yeah,
for those of us who have seats at tables where our
yeah,
presence is so important, and how we show up, how we come into those rooms, what we do while we're at the table. I often say if we have seats at tables and we are unaware of our voice power, we can't complain when we become the meal.
Absolutely. Yes. I have a dear friend that says, if you're not at the table, then guess what? You know you're on the menu, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. So being so fully aware, I try to be very fully aware of how I come into spaces, what I'm doing while I'm in the space, how I want the space to feel after I've left it, how I want people to feel after I have been in their presence. That's very important to me. So
Yeah.
for us to be very mindful of that powerful 93% that we embody is a critical piece of voice positioning.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And as you were sharing that, what came to mind for me, because of course, just, a week ago, we were all acknowledging the anniversary of George Floyd's murder, where there was one city where the protests were still happening, of course, after the murder. And there were a group of white citizens who took to the front of the line and they kind of joined arms and hands to say, we stand with our, Black and brown brothers and sisters, and we're not going to necessarily be shielded behind them. We're going to be at the front of the line so that, all of you who are perceived that this group of people are here to do harm. No, we're here for a peaceful protest. And I thought that was such a powerful way presence that gave voice to something that I think was really a reminder that humanity can still be found in certain places. And so, okay, I see
And
that
Dr.
Takia.
Nika, I have to point this out too. It goes back to something you said in your amazing book. Let me just kind of throw that in there in your amazing book. But you talk about what it means to be an ally. And that's what I thought about as you were sharing what it means to be an ally. And you clearly say to be able to do that, you must understand systems of oppression. And being
Yes.
an ally is a powerful way to use your 7%, but also in that instance, your 93%, right? Just that
Absolutely.
visible presence of being an ally that says,
Mhm.
listen, we're going to intervene, disrupt
Yeah.
these systems of oppression just by our presence, right?
Yeah.
When everything happened with George Floyd, I had several of my white friends and colleagues reach out to say to me, what can we do? What should we be
Yeah.
saying?
Yeah.
And my direction for them, because I was so heartbroken during that time
Mhm.
of grieving,
Yes.
one of the things that I said to them to not reach out to people who look like me, but to have
Mm.
conversations around your tables, right?
Mhm.
To have
Mhm.
conversations behind your closed doors,
Right.
to really consider what this means and if you have the heart to act, right?
Yeah.
Do you have the
Absolutely.
heart to care about cause and effect? How you want to use your power for good, right? So just that those are powerful instances of voice and the choices we make in terms of how we show up for ourselves, but also for each other.
Absolutely. This is so rich. Okay, Takia, I'm going to let you present your question, and this is how we're going to close out. You present your question, and then we'll let Dr. K to respond. Go for it.
Hi, Dr. K. Such a powerful conversation today. My question for you, I am currently trying to understand my presence and find my voice, and I struggle with determining obligation. So can you give some advice on how you determine what is your obligation? I think sometimes I make myself obligated to things that I should not.
Oh, that
Mm,
is so good, Takia.
that
Thank
is a good
you
question.
so much for your question. So here is how I will respond to that. Obligation is a have to when I feel like I have to, right? Understanding whether or not something is an obligation is being able to step back instead of looking at I have to and asking ourselves, can I find the honor in this?
Mm, mm,
Can I find the honor, right? And if I can't find honor in it, if there is nothing in me that can connect to it and find honor in it, it is probably not something for me, right? Because my yes should always be connected to not I have to, it should be connected to I get to, right? And when I can bring I get to it, that is where honor is, right? So always examine where honor shows up. So before your yes, always asking yourself the question, can I find honor in this, right?
mm.
I hope that's helpful.
If not helpful for Takia, which I'm sure it is, it was definitely helpful for me when I saw where Takia kind of acknowledged into the chat that she loved your response to that. Gosh, that was so
Very
rich, so
helpful.
rich.
I had to type it down and put it in my notes. Thank you so much.
That is so great. Thanks for being here, Takia. Thanks for your question. So we are out of time, but Dr. K, I want to give you the final 60 seconds for you to close us out in whatever way that feels appropriate to you. If there's something that you've been holding that you have a lot of power and energy for that you want to express and socialize to this community, I want to give you that chance to do so. I also want to thank you for being here today and sharing with us.
Thank you, Dr. Nika. It has been an honor, certainly, to be here. Dr. Nika, you are one of those people who can call me or reach out at any time, and my answer will be yes, because I will always find honor in what you do and the ways in which you do it. But for this community, and as we wrap our time together, I really want to encourage every person that joined us and will join us in the replay is to think about at all times the power of your voice, what it means to you to be seen, to be heard, and to be valued. You know, we were never created for exclusion. There is research that even shows that our brains are not wired for exclusion. Our brains are actually social organs. And so we need each other, but we also need each other to connect individually, but also connect our voices together for the greater good, for a sense of collaborative movement forward. And so Mother Teresa has a quote that I love: we do no great things, only small things with great love. So this work, our effort, is not about running out and doing these great big things, but it is being so present in the moments that we have, and embracing those moments with great love, that we feel those moments with great power. And that is what moves us forward.
Nothing else left to say. Thank you. Thank you, my friend. Thank you so much. Everyone, enjoy your weekend.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Bye-bye.